Layla from the ANC. Thanks so much for joining. Can we just check your mic real quick?
Sure, yeah. It looks like I need to turn on some lights perhaps. How's my mic?
Yeah, your mic's great, and actually your video is great too. Okay. And I think Commissioner Ray is going to make me the host, and then when we get to your part, I can just let you screen share for your section if that works.
Okay, great. I was just about to send you the slides, so I'll do that anyways, just in case that doesn't work, but I'll prepare to screen share too.
Okay.
And Layla, or Commissioner Bonneau, you should be a co-host now?
Looks like you've already hit record, which is great. And good for people on the line to know that we are recording. It's just for our internal note-taking purposes, not to post publicly. And let's see.
We can see that nice and clear.
Great. See, more people are logging in, which is great. This is Commissioner Bonneau. Thank you all so much for joining. We will wait a couple more minutes before we get started. I think a lot of folks have been on webinars lately, but if you haven't and you need any help, feel free to chat myself or any of the other commissioners and we can assist you. It's really great if you can keep yourself on mute to minimize background noise until you'd like to join in the conversation. And if you click on the top panel, there should be 3 dots that say more, and then you can click chat, and that will open the chat window for you, and you can go ahead and have that ready. We know some of you might be making dinner or taking care of folks at home. So if you prefer to participate in the chat, that's great. If you're able to be on video with us, that's wonderful as well. We love to see your faces. And yeah, we'll give folks maybe another minute and then we'll get started. And I should have put this on the slide, but we definitely welcome your at-home coworkers, pets, partners, roommates, and we recognize this is the time of COVID where that is the reality. So don't be worried about any of that. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And I know we'll have a few more people join as we get underway. If I haven't met you before, my name is Layla Bonneau. I live on the 1400 block of Parkwood Place Northwest. I've lived here a little over 10 years, and this is my first term as a neighborhood commissioner. And I am a co-lead for our ANC's Public Safety Committee. And we run this committee in partnership with the Public Safety Coalition, and you'll be hearing from them shortly. And we have these committee meetings typically monthly, and so this was already on the calendar when the unfortunate events of July 19th happened. And so we've adjusted the agenda to reflect that. But we had already invited Community Mediation DC to spend time with us today, and I actually think it's just still really like relevant and appropriate for them to share their work with us and for us to all just spend time in community with each other. And you'll see like later in the agenda, you know, we'll spend more dedicated time on the July 19th shooting, but just want each of you to be able to introduce yourself, either if you want to go off mute or in the chat, and just tell us your name, your neighborhood or affiliation. So if you're here from a government office or nonprofit, that's great to hear as well. And then what brought you to tonight's call. And I think that'll help us shape the conversation. And I will pick on Commissioner Clark, if you don't mind going next.
Sure. My name is Jason Clark. I am ANC Commissioner 1812, which is 13th to 16th between Girard and Columbia. Public safety has been a big issue. This is also my first term. Public safety is a big issue for me, and I really hope that we can find solutions to these issues. I'm happy to have this monthly meeting just to discuss what's going on in the neighborhood and the unfortunate events, of course, too. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to go in my video panel order, so it's a little random. I see Lily Battelle Horton, and perhaps your person.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lily, and this is my husband, Christian. We live in the condo building right on 14th and Spring, so we were definitely rattled by the shooting on the 19th. We were home, actually we were outside when it happened, and it was, I mean, terrifying as an understatement. Actually, my sister used to live on 14th and Perry, so she forwarded along, she's on the neighborhood listserv, forwarded along the email. We're happy to be here tonight and hear from other people in the community about what we can all do or what needs to be done to ensure that violent acts like that don't happen again.
Thank you both for joining. Anne Hoffman?
Yeah, hi. I have lived for 4 years at Kenyon Square at 14th and Kenyon. And I've come to several of these meetings because I really am interested in finding out what you can do without getting the police involved in most of the stuff that gets people in my building riled up. So that's it.
Thanks, Anne. Allie?
Hi, everybody. My name is Allie Bobak. I'm the Constituent Services Coordinator for Councilmember Nadeau. I'm also a resident of Parkview, so also a neighbor. I'll put my contact information into the group chat, but here today to listen and accompany the council member who is joining us as well.
Thanks, Allie. Councilmember Nadeau?
You're muted.
You would think I'd be a pro by now, having been on Zoom all day for budget hearings. I'm Brianne Nadeau. I'm the Ward 1 council member. I also live in Parkview in ANC 1A. And I'm really excited to be with you tonight, not for the reason that I'm here, but because it's been a while since I've been able to join the committee. And I'm looking forward to spending a lot of time listening on this meeting and then having the opportunity just to share what we're doing on the council to address safety for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Rose Schneider?
I'm Rose Schneider. I live on Perry Place. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
I've lived on Perry Place for about 32 years, so I've seen a lot of changes in the neighborhood. I'm here to try to contribute and to listen also and be concerned about the broader issues of some of the reasons why our neighborhoods are perhaps unsafe or have a perception of being unsafe. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. Laura, Catalina? Catania, I'm sorry, I added some letters to your name there.
Okay, it happens. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Catania. I live in Columbia Heights on Monroe Street between 10th and 11th. I've been living here for about 3.5 years, and I'm here tonight just because I haven't been able to attend a public safety committee meeting in a long time. I just wanted to come back and participate and help out in whatever way I could.
Thanks. Cynthia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Tercios. I'm with the mayor's office. I'm just joining for awareness and then for anything I can help with. And I know I've been working closely with Commissioner Bonneau on public safety, so just happy to be joining today.
Thanks, Cynthia. If you don't mind putting your contact info in the chat when you get a chance, that would be great.
I will, and I'll also go ahead and just say it for those that may be joining over the phone. Not sure if there's anybody who's joining over the phone, but just in case, my phone number is 202-553-8032, and my email address is my first name, Cynthia, CYNTHIA, last name, TURCIOS@dc.gov. Thank you again. I'll put that in the chat as well.
Thanks. Let's go to Steve Dryden.
Hi, I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Steve Dryden. I'm the director of the Rock Creek Songbirds Habitat Restoration Project, which is focused on the Piney Branch part of the park, which abuts Quincy Alley. I know this is Ward 4, but of course, since Ward 1 residents are users of the park and are members of our community, it certainly concerns them. And I'm concerned about, of course, anything that goes on in Ward 1 on the edge there, Spring Road, because a lot of these social problems spill over into the park. And we've been trying to improve the habitat by planting trees. We've been also trying to create recreational activities, make it safer and more welcoming for people to go into the park there. And as some of you know, it currently is not particularly welcoming because of the drinking, drugging, prostitution, etc., which tends to gravitate over there. So I'm concerned always about what's going on 14th Street because it reflects back on the park, and happy to help. We've actually managed to clean up Quincy Alley, which abuts the park, and get it paved by DDOT in the past month, which was a great improvement. And we're working on other projects right now related to that.
Thanks, Steve. Chander?
Hi, this is Chander. Can you guys hear me?
Uh-huh.
I am Vice Chair of ANC 6B and just here to listen and provide input where I can. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Harrison?
Hi, this is Harrison. I'm here with my wife, Amy. We're residents on Parkwood. We're neighbors with Layla, and we're here obviously out of concern for public safety, and especially as it relates to the incident this past weekend.
Thanks. Anita?
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Anita and I live at 3800 14th Street, so about half a block from where this has happened. This is the first time I'm joining this sort of neighborhood panel. I'm here to listen to everybody's reaction and to understand the direction that this neighborhood is taking in order to remedy and help what is happening in our community.
Thank you. Christina Hanhart? And
Hi.
you might be, oh, here.
We introduced ourselves in the chat. I'm Christina Hanhart, and I'm here with my partner, Eva. Hi. We also live at Kenyon Square on the corner of Kenyon and 14th, and we're here because we're really invested in finding community-centered, non-policing responses to issues of neighborhood safety, displacement, and so-called quality of life concerns in the neighborhood.
Thanks, Christina. And yes, I'm seeing that now in the chat. So thanks for putting that there as well. Apologies for that. So Adam has also introduced himself in the chat. So Adam, if you want to add anything, now's a great time. Otherwise, we'll have folks read your introduction in the chat. And I think you're muted.
Just hello to everybody.
Thanks so much. All right. Group is picking up. We've got Will McAuliffe.
Yeah, hi everybody. Like others have said, just in the neighborhood, I'm on Lamont and 13th, and want to hear what everybody's working on and however I can help.
Thanks so much. Walter.
Hey, this is actually Jenna. I've hijacked his Zoom account. So Walter and I live on Perry Place. This is, I think, the first meeting we've been able to attend, so it's great that we're doing it on Zoom. And we are here because we were home when the incident happened on Sunday. It was very scary. Our house actually was shaking. And we've actually had a lot of sort of, not to that degree, but we've had various incidents occurring to us, and we're kind of considering leaving the neighborhood at this point. So we're here just to listen to everyone and hear what other people's feedback is.
Thanks, Jenna. Looks like we have somebody dialed in on the phone, so I wanted to see if they wanted to unmute and introduce themselves. And we can come back to you if you're able to unmute. All right, Russell?
Hi, yeah, Russell and Cheryl Logan. We live on Fairmont between 13th and 14th. And we've been here in the neighborhood a little over 2 years.
Great, thanks so much for joining. Owen?
Yeah, hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Owen. I live on Perry, and yeah, just interested in listening, learning what we can about the situation and how we can kind of come together holistically to talk about public safety in the neighborhood. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Owen. Katie Giordano.
Hi, I'm Katie Giordano, and this is my fiance, Henry. We live at 14th and Perry, right on the alley next to Jenna. And this is our first meeting. Wish we had joined these sooner, but given everything that's happening, we're interested in how to kind of work on some of these situations in a responsible way. So just curious to see what everyone has to say.
Thank you both for joining. Luz Martinez from Councilmember Nadeau's office has introduced themselves in the chat as well and included their contact information. So thank you for that. All right. We have, is it the ladies?
Hello, hi, yes, it's the ladies, thank you. I'm here, I live on Center Street. I've been in kind of the middle of everything. We don't live as close to Spring Road, but I love what everyone has said so far. I'm here for the same reasons, part of the community since the 90s, and just pretty much want to show support, help however we can. I agree with the person earlier who said something about like getting together as a community and like seeing what we can do to help. Here to help.
Thanks so much. Elias?
Hi, my name is Elias. I live on Perry Place, 14th and Perry Place. Been on Perry Place for about the last 3 years, in the greater neighborhood for about the last 6. Just here to listen and learn. Thanks.
Thank you. J. Brian Charles.
Yeah, I'm a actual reporter with the Trace. We have taken interest in this incident that happened on Sunday as part of a larger group of type of incidents that have been happening in DC and quite a few other cities. And I'm just here to listen. I won't be. I may put questions in the chat for individual folks if they want to talk later, but I'm probably just going to listen here.
Great, thank you. All right. The list has jumped around a little bit. We're going to have Bob and CJ introduce themselves as part of our next segment. Is there anybody else who did not get a chance to introduce themselves yet? Commissioner Ray, did I call on you?
You didn't, but you know, I've been here the whole time.
Sorry about that.
You know, it's fine. Commissioner Michael Ray, I'm over in the Parkview side of the neighborhood, 1A09. Just, you know, here to listen and to help however I can. So thanks.
Thank you. I know our co-lead for the Public Safety Committee, Angelica Castagnon, is with us, but maybe stepped away. So I don't know if you're back, but I know she'll be on with us a little later. Did I miss? Oh, and then Caroline is going to be our speaker when we get to Community Mediation DC, but did you want to say hello?
Sure, I'll say a quick hello. Hi everybody, I'm Caroline. I'll definitely speak more when it's my official turn. And also I live at 8th and Randolph Street Northwest, so also very close to 1A, and my first home in DC was at 14th and Girard, so I feel also very connected to this this neighborhood and community, and look forward to learning more from you all and sharing more about mediation.
Thanks, Caroline. And MC?
Hi.
All right.
Hopefully you can see me. Oh, my name is Mariana Kotlier. I'm a resident of 3701 14th Street, and I witnessed the shooting that took place on Sunday. So I am here to understand what folks are doing and share a little bit of the advocacy I've been doing, and try to make this place more safe.
I'm really sorry that you witnessed that, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Bob and CJ to introduce themselves and speak a little bit about their work and leadership around the Public Safety Coalition and the mutual aid movement.
Cool. CJ, if you don't mind, I'll start and then you can fill in on the back end. My name is Bob Schlehuber. I live at 1120 Lamont Street. I wear a lot of different hats. I am a full-time peace builder. So for me, that's using arts as a tool of organizing. So think producer, artist, organizer. And I love bringing different community members together. And so tonight I'm representing the Public Safety Coalition as well as Mutual Aid Movement, MAM DC. And then just a shout out, one, Chander, thank you for joining us. Chander failed to mention he was running for DC Council at Large. I also am the senior advisor to Will Merrifield, who is running for DC Council at Large as well. Will was a lawyer with the DC Clinic for the Homeless, and he realized after spending 8 years of having to answer the phone once a week as a legal aid at the clinic for people that are experiencing emergencies, that he needed to amplify his call and his work to call for more housing in the district. And so much of what we are seeing when it comes to violence, and man, I can't even process what people had to see the shooting, and I appreciate people being here with heavy hearts, and it's scary to think that people are considering having to move away from our neighborhoods or don't feel safe in their own homes, let alone in the street or in a dark alley or anything like that, but in your own homes. So I just want to sit with that reality and what you're all feeling. We live in a city that's incredibly violent to poor people and to people of color. We've seen tremendous displacement, gentrification, extensive rates of poverty in the city. We have the highest homelessness per capita in the entire country, the highest incarceration rate per capita in the entire country. And we just saw a new report out that I'll drop here, but during the COVID response, there was an article by AMP Reports that writes here, Black people are more overrepresented among the Capitol's dead than America's other largest cities and counties from the COVID-19 pandemic. The fatality rate among the city's Black residents is 5.9 times higher than for white residents, double the disparity in Chicago, triple New Orleans gap, and nearly quadruple Detroit. And we also then have the realities of people not getting served, and the realities a lot of people are getting served. And I speak specifically to developers and real estate companies who have made tons of money at the expense of poor Black people and poor people in general. And just to give you a sense of it, 11 of our 13 council members, including our own council member, their number one donor are from the class of development, construction, real estate, and housing. Only Trayon White and Alyssa Silverman's top donors are not real estate and development. And I'll also share that from dcplayers.com. So we have a huge fight right now. We have a government that is responsive to those who donate to them. And we're seeing the health disparities, and we're seeing the violence that comes with it, either from the COVID pandemic or what we're seeing because of homelessness and these root causes that lead to these great acts of violence. And I know it's hard to see the people that are committing these acts of violence as victims themselves. And so if you don't understand what I'm saying, I would challenge you to understand that and think about that, which is just really heavy, that we live in a really unstable, unforgiving city. What we do have, though, which I think is remarkable, is a tremendous amount of resources. And we have tremendous people like yourselves that are willing to meet and come together in response to that. And I don't think a lot of communities have the energy and the passion and the support networks that we have here within Ward 1 and within ANC 1A. And so we're blessed and we're thankful for that. About 3 years ago, I started the Ward 1 Near Act Study Group. And the study group was to learn more about the Neighborhood Engagement and Achieved Results Act of 2016, which took a public health approach towards reducing violent crime. So violence interrupters that weren't police, having first responders and trauma specialists at hospitals. So if somebody came in with a gunshot or a wound, that people wouldn't retaliate and go back out into the community, measuring violence statistics, measuring health outputs, and understanding violence as a public health issue that could be cured, something that we could actually collectively eliminate from our communities outside of policing. So that group evolved into what's called the Public Safety Coalition. So we had a bunch of individuals who recognized the need for more of our institutions and organizations to organize and work together. And so CJ and myself, for the last year and a half, have been organizing the Ward 1 Public Safety Coalition. And it's a coalition comprised of nonprofit, business, government, health, educators, civil society groups, senior groups, youth groups, as well as longtime and new residents. And it was our belief that if we could start bringing together groups that don't traditionally work, and we could have a holistic approach towards crime and violence and safety, we would be able to create a more equitable and just community amongst ourselves. When the pandemic hit, we created what has been called MAM DC. So yes, ma'am. And we partner with Columbia Heights Village Tenant Association to provide roughly 3,000 meals a week to different residents throughout our community, as well as groceries on a weekly and bi-weekly basis. In addition to that, we've helped support making sure people could get to access to tests, as well as make sure people had all the healthcare support that they needed, as well as emotional and physical support along the way. So I'm gonna drop a lot of different links. To those of you who are joining us for the first time, these meetings are always painful because we have the same meetings so often. Is because we rush to look for short, quick fixes. Oftentimes that feels like police. Oftentimes that seems like the kind of the historical justice and carceral approach. The hard work is the long time organizing, building the relationships that we have, building relationships like we have with Caroline Cragen of Community Mediation DC, with the ANC members, with Brianne Nadeau, Councilmember Nadeau, excuse me, thank you for being here, building these relationships. All of you here, it takes long-term relationship building to see a change. And that's hard to kind of stay that focused when we have such urgent crises in front of us. So I'll leave it there. I really appreciate all of you. I'll drop my phone number, contact, a few emails that you can learn more about Will, about Public Safety Coalition, about MAM-DC. Please donate to MAM-DC. Right now, the government resources, as Councilmember Nadeau, thank you for speaking up on the budgetary needs. Other council members and the mayor have not continued to support COVID response. And we're going to see a huge vacuum created from what we've had resource-wise from the government the last 4 or 5 months into a much different situation moving forward. And so we desperately need individual donations. So thank you all again. I'm moved that so many people showed up tonight. I'm gonna hand it off to CJ Jackson, who's just an incredible organizer. He grew up at Columbia Heights Village, has one of the best perspectives on what's taking place on the ground, and tons of insights. I learned a tremendous amount from him. So I'll thank him as well as Angelica and Layla for hosting us tonight. CJ, are you here?
You may have fallen off. Oh, no, I see you. Yeah. CJ, do you want to try again? We can't hear you.
CJ spits too much truth.
Okay.
So they often try to silence his voice. So when he joins back on,
your metaphor is great. Yeah, he's going to call back in. While he's doing that, I wanted to let you all know that our co-lead, Commissioner Angelica Castagnon, has introduced herself in the chat. So Commissioner, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I just want to also say I'm sorry for being late. It's just all of these meetings always fall at 7 o'clock, and that is exactly when I feed my son and get him ready for bed. So thank you for your patience, and I'm so happy you all are amazing leaders and got started perfectly fine without me.
Thanks for being here. You missed my whole spiel in the beginning that was like, if you have pets running around or you're feeding somebody or taking care of something, like be on video, don't be on video, whatever you need. We're very flexible in these times.
Yes.
Hi, can folks hear me now?
Yes.
Cool, yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Bob, for that introduction and talking the context around MAM-DC and the Public Safety Coalition. As similar to Bob, I wear a bunch of hats too. My name is Calvin. I grew up here in Columbia Heights. I've been organizing for about 3 years. I started organizing, particularly around like youth development, and that kind of evolved into like safety issues and then some kind of infrastructure, like organization infrastructure building stuff. I work with Rising Organizers, and so I run their community engagement department. So we help train folks on how to organize individuals and organizations. We also help connect individuals who want to get involved in different organizing with, the people that's doing the work. We actually have a panel coming up, and I'll give more details about that probably at the end of just a little later. But yeah, I think like the pertinent thing for me and why I joined this call and it's to piggyback off what Bob said is that, I feel like there's been, I don't want to put a number to it, but for me, it's growing up in Columbia Heights, there's almost like a shooting. There's people I know that get shot almost like every year. And it seems like every couple months, there's a big shooting, especially here in Columbia Heights. I think a lot of people are under the assumption that like the trauma that we experience here in Columbia Heights is different than, the trauma that's east of the river. And while there's a bunch of different layers to oppression, there's, I grew up seeing Black people here get criminalized. I grew up seeing Black people here get under-resourced. And then that always results in just Black dead bodies in the streets and however you want to slice it. Recently I've been seeing a lot of images. I know but basically a couple of weeks ago on 4th of July, a youth was shot in Cedar Gardens, Southeast, and no one really knows like who the killer was. And so I've been seeing a lot of images of the 3 people that they did end up catching or trying to, there's been 3 people, images have been circulating, MPD has been circulating, and they've connected them with the death. Not to put people's business out there, one of those persons was my cousin, and people don't shoot up their own neighborhoods and kill youth, especially at cookouts and gatherings in DC. That's just like not happening. I think it's a sad reality that
that people see these issues as kind of, there's a certain group of people in our society that see these issues as kind of innate to these group of people, as if their blackness is what's caused these crimes. And when people speak about defunding the police, when people speak about Black Lives Matter, we're speaking about the oppression that the killer and the killed went through that put them both in those situations. The same resources that we need that's going to keep that, you know, that young Black boy from dying or that young Hispanic boy from getting shot is the same resources that's going to stop that other Black guy or that other kid, period, from picking up the gun in the first place. And it's really maddening for me to see, especially people in our community, especially Black people, you know, say like, what about the Black on Black crime? No one speaks about that. You all aren't organizing around that. And then that's exactly what we're organizing around. You know, when people say defund the police, again, it's not just about taking money from the police, it's about taking that money and reinvesting it in things that's going to, you know, that's going to produce good for our material outcomes. And so that's why I, you know, joined this call. That's why I organize. That's why I help. I'm trying to build this public safety coalition because, as Bob said, it seems like we're on these calls, we're at these, you know, town halls almost like every, you know, 2-3 months, and it's just very exhausting. It was very, very painful for me to grow up in Columbia Heights and see youth squirming on the ground, you know, because they were just involved in a shootout. And it's very disheartening to see that the only reaction that we're going to get from our like NPD is just more overreactive policing. And that's just like not the solution for this. And so I'm glad that we're able to build a coalition where we're trying to have a holistic view of safety, where we're trying to shift the focus from centering the police as a solution to centering creative, like culturally competent plans for how we want to address, you know, these crimes and all the whole catalog of oppression in our community here in Columbia Heights. With that said, so next Wednesday, I've been working with a couple folks. We're trying to do a visual for the person that died, and I'll have more. We have a planning call tomorrow, so I don't have too much information outside. It's going to be Wednesday. And Rise of Organizers, we're having a policing panel where we're spotlighting a representative from the ACLU DC, Free Minds Book Club, and they work with formerly incarcerated youth and people in general, not just youth, but older, you know, adults. And also someone from the Reentry Network. And so we're just trying to spotlight people that's doing the work and again, connect individuals who want to get involved with these organizations. So yeah, I'm also glad that everyone, you know, is on this call, especially like the community members who are on this call because they're concerned about safety, and especially the ones that understand that there is a problem with safety, but the solution for that isn't going to be centering the police. So thank you.
Thank you both. I did want to point out in the chat, Jasmine Benab from the Deputy Mayor's Office of Public Safety and Justice is on the line as well, listening in. So thank you, Jasmine, for being here as well. And CJ and Bob, thank you so much. If anybody, and for putting all those resources in the chat, CJ will make sure that we can share that vigil information with the group following today's call as well. All right, if you have any questions for Bob and CJ, go ahead and put those in the chat. And then in the interest of time, we're gonna move on to Caroline. And Caroline, thank you so much for being here from Community Mediation DC. I'm not sure if you're able to share your screen or if Angelica needs to give you the powers that be to do that.
Yeah, it looks like I think that only hosts can, now I'm a host. Yeah, great, okay. Yes, I'm gonna share a screen temporarily, and this looks like it'll stop the screen sharing that's happening.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Layla, you may need to unshare what you have up.
Sure. Now I can see more people in the little Zoom squares.
Yeah, sorry, not for long. Taking over again. Great. So thank you all for having me. It's exciting to be here and to hear on the passionate energy that's in this space. And really my main goal for today, I think, is to make sure that you all sort of are aware around the resources that Community Mediation DC offers, both in the context of the recent shooting as well as Commissioner Bonneau, did I get that right? Yeah, cool. Bonneau had mentioned sort of this is also an in general announcement. And I think following some of what Bob and CJ shared, I invite you all to think about and ask questions that consider mediation as both like a short-term and immediate tool that is at your disposal, as well as a tool for really long-term change and community building. So overall, Community Mediation DC, we're a local nonprofit. And the main thing we do is that we offer mediation services at no cost for all DC residents. And particularly during COVID, we're offering mediation virtually. I admit it is not as, I don't love offering mediation virtually the way that I do in person. And it's something that we plan to do at least through 2020. So we're making sure that this resource is still available to people. And mediation we offer as a tool for all different types of disputes, as well as for collaborative planning needs. So the way we offer mediation at no cost is that we train volunteers to reflect the diversity of DC in concrete mediation skills at no cost in exchange for their volunteer hours. So our mediators both reflect the diversity of DC in sort of the visible ways, so in terms of age, race, gender identity, as well as life experience. So as I'll share in a moment, one of our largest mediation programs takes place at the DC jail. And so many of our mediators are returning citizens themselves. We have mediators who are Washingtonians who grew up in the area. We have mediators who are lawyers and social workers and teachers. And when folks are mediating, they're putting all of that stuff aside and they're just mediating. They're just there to create a space for folks who want to talk. And they're there to listen and figure out what's important to everybody at the table and work with you all to come up with collaborative solutions. So some examples that I have up on the screen include mediation around workplace and school-related disputes. So in this immediate context, this can include conflicts around remote work, returning to work. This can include parent-teacher or student distance learning challenges. We also mediate family and relationship disputes. So this might be co-parenting plans, conflicts between parents and teens, other types of relationship challenges, or using mediation for family dialogue and planning. I mentioned the Reentry Program briefly, and this is a service that we offer pre-release at the DC jail, as well as throughout the community. And it's specifically for folks when it's pre-release who are returning from jail within 3 to 6 months. And they're letting us know people on the outside that they want to bring in to either deal with conflict from before incarceration or just to make collaborative plans and collaborative living arrangement kinds of plans. The last piece we offer is around neighborhood conflicts. And so some of the examples of stuff we've done in DC are conflicts between neighbors who live in the same apartment building. So these might be conflicts that start out as a noise complaint and have started to escalate into many calls to the police. They may be escalating towards potential threats of evictions from landlords who are sick of the neighbors calling them with noise complaints, and just a range of different challenges between neighbors, from things that folks might believe sort of appear small to things that already appear kind of large and escalated. This might also be landlords and tenants making rent payment plans, as that's something that's starting to happen right now. Conflicts between civic associations, between small businesses moving next door to local residents. So I think in particular in the context of the conversation that started before me, it feels useful to think about mediation as a tool for dealing with conflicts with your neighbors, as well as a tool for preventing violence by getting at some of the root of the challenges. So we recognize that lots of the community violence that many of you expressed concerns about stems from conflicts that are mediatable. And I would say one of the challenges that we've faced as an organization is in particular in the context of folks who are looking for alternatives to the police. We may get phone calls from DC residents who are concerned about activity that might lead to police involvement, and so are looking for, okay, how can we use mediation to try to make some plans that get us safety and that avoid police involvement? And the place that the scenario ends up getting stuck is that people don't have the relationships with the community members they want to make plans with. So for us to turn something into a mediation, we start by talking with anybody who's involved. This might be somebody who's referring a friend or neighbor, or this might be you calling on behalf of yourself. And then we do need contact information for the next people. So we'll go through the process of explaining mediation, figuring out briefly what you might want to talk about, and making sure that you think mediation is a good fit. And then the next step is for us to reach out to the other people involved. And so I think one of my excitements about talking to this coalition and to this meeting, but also having sort of coalition members here, is that I think we are excited to work with community members who are committed to building some of these relationships that may be needed to help get mediations to the table. So one of the things we're actually working on, and I've spoken with Councilmember Nadeau's office as well about this, is trying to offer some sort of ambassador training. So this would be for folks who are already playing leadership roles in their communities and may be able to get some buy-in for supporting folks in getting to the mediation table. This is something we're also doing with violence interruption groups in the city who have some on-the-ground relationships that we may not have, and may not always have the capacity to do these multiple session mediations to really get at the root of the problem, especially when they're really focused on preventing this kind of immediate and escalated types of violence. So I'm seeing some things in the chat. I just wanted to pause and see. Looks like there's some folks who are interested in focusing on the situation at 14th. I'm going to let other folks answer that. I'm just browsing for any questions about community mediation. Okay, and I don't see any yet. So the last piece I wanted to share, and then I'll also open it up to more questions. So as far as the mediation process itself goes, you can have as many sessions as you want. We schedule each mediation session for 2 hours. And all of the sessions offered are available at no cost. So the broad process that you're using is when you go into a mediation, we're explaining what mediation is, getting consent from folks to participate. We're inviting people to talk about the situation that brought them to mediation. Mediators are listening, asking questions, trying to figure out what's important to everybody involved. And then we're using that to help build a list of topics, which are things folks have been having conflict about or may want to make plans about, creating space for brainstorming solutions to those topics, and then providing space for writing an agreement. So that's the sort of mediation process overview. I think that's the last piece I wanted to make sure to share, and then I'd love to hear if there's any questions or other areas that would be helpful for me to talk about.
Yeah, Caroline, it looks like a question came in the chat asking where Community Mediation DC's funding comes from.
Sure. So it's something we're still working on, but right now we get we get some funding from the city for the Reentry Program specifically, and that's through the Office of Victim Services and Justice grants. The majority of our community-based funding comes either from individuals, we get some funding from a family foundation, and some funding from the National Association for Community Mediation. We're also a 2-staff person organization, so we don't actually have a ton of funding and really rely on partnerships with community members to do the bulk of our work. And so I see another question coming in that asks, do we mediate and get involved in cases like the 14th Street shooting where there has already been violence? So absolutely. So the goal of our program is to provide mediation at early stages of dispute as well as at every stage of conflict. So ideally, we're able to offer mediation early on to prevent escalation, and we're committed to making sure that no matter how escalated something has gotten, mediation is still a resource. So I was trying to think if there's sort of an example to share there. So I would say, I think in the context of after shootings, in terms of our actual experience in DC, most of the work that we've done has been through our Reentry Mediation program. So this is folks who are planning to now return to their community, might be worried about violence that could result from their return to the community, and are looking to make plans with their support people about how to deal with and cope with that kind of violence. So I think that's sort of the biggest example I could give around immediate violence focus.
And this is Commissioner Ray. I asked the question about the funding, and I think it's important that the community understand where this is coming from, especially it is budget season, so it's a little late in the day now. But as we're looking at next year and we're seeing what things that are working in our communities, it's important that we advocate that these kinds of programs do receive that kind of attention. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the other piece, so yes, we are always in need of more funding, and that will really help us expand our program. I think another thing that I like to say is often folks think that because we're a free resource, that they don't want to request mediation, they don't want to take away this resource from other people. And actually, you yourselves using mediation helps to build peace in the community and helps to build up a community mediation program in DC. So we rely on word of mouth referrals, we rely on who use mediation for one thing and then have a useful experience and want to use it for something else. And so I also encourage many of you who are interested in looking for non-police solutions to violence, like to consider this a resource for yourself, not just for others in your neighborhood, but to think about how you might be able to incorporate mediation and use it as a tool to deal with your own conflicts or sort of collaborative planning needs.
Caroline, I think you're reading that most recent question that came in.
Yeah.
So we do have a couple of folks on the phone, so I'll just read it out.
Great, thank you.
The question is, from your experience with conflicts involving people who have resorted to violence, what are the kinds of disputes that have typically been escalating to violence like the ones we saw this past weekend?
So I think from my perspective as sort of a mediator and overseeing the programs is that every situation we mediate is consistently incredibly different from each other. And I think in terms of the answer for this, I think that the thing to consider is what kind of relationships do you all have that can support community safety? And also considering no conflict is sort of too small to work through. So I think some of the research that I think leads to the founding of community mediation programs is the idea that communities want control over how they're resolving their own disputes, and that when there are only tools that exist, like courts or police, that may not give communities their own input in terms of how to resolve something, that people lose faith in terms of the tools that they can use at their disposal. So I think the piece here is around figuring out what relationships can you build and what are the ways that you can help kind of get mediations to the table without assuming that something feels too small to get to the mediation table. I also see one more question I'm going to read out loud. And so this one is around, sorry, I'm new to reading some of these questions aloud. So I see the question around, we need mediators on the ground, and how can we provide training to neighborhood ambassadors? Oh, great, and this question was coming from Commissioner Nadeau. So this is something that I'd love to follow up with around this committee. So we're working to figure out sort of 4 components to a training and would love input from you all. The 2 components that we're hoping to offer to folks who are community leaders, ANC commissioners, people who are sort of closest on the ground to some of the conflicts that are having, is training both around some of the conflict management skills that you can use in your own life as folks around you are experiencing conflict, as well as tools for making effective referrals. And a lot of that comes to being willing to sort of convince people and encourage people to use a tool like mediation. So we know that just because we hang up flyers in our communities that say mediation is free and we'll do it at a time that's convenient for you, that's not enough to actually get people to the mediation table. There's a lot of stigma around involving other folks in your own disputes, kind of airing your shit to other people. And there's also just confusion around what is mediation, why is it relevant to me? And so a part of this training, as well as just our interest in doing presentations and having conversations like this, is to encourage you all to continue this conversation with your neighbors and try to make mediation something that feels accessible to people and that feels relevant.
Caroline, thanks so much. And thank you all for questions in the chat. Commissioner Miller has joined us, and this will be the final question, asking if it's a bilingual program.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that question. So we have we've actually been doing this work for about 3 years in DC, and only three of our 25 mediators also speak Spanish. So and that's the only other language we offer besides English. Because we're committed to making sure mediations get to the table sort of on like a one-off basis as we get referrals that require other language services, we encourage you all to still make those referrals, and we're committed to working through that with you. And on our end, we're focusing more on building that capacity than on advertising this service in other languages, just because we recognize, like, if this comes up, we can deal with it right away, and we still definitely need more capacity to be able to offer mediation in other languages.
Thank you. And is this the best way to get in touch with you? And I know commissioners will probably want to follow up to hear more about how we might be able to get training, but then this committee would definitely want to stay involved on that ambassador program.
Absolutely. And I'll go ahead and paste all that into the chat box as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. If you have other questions for Caroline that we didn't get to, feel free to put them in the chat and I can relay those to her later. We're now going to have Cynthia Tercios from the mayor's office give us an update on what happened on July 19th and the response since that time, and just engage in a community discussion. And yeah, okay. There was a good push to not pull a slide back up so we can see more of each other's faces, and I like that suggestion. So more Zoom squares is a better conversation. All right, so Cynthia, if you want to I think everyone knows what happened on the 19th, but if you can kind of recap for us what happened, what we know, where we are now, the response, and then I'll help facilitate a discussion with community members.
For sure. Thank you for letting me speak. So again, my name is Cynthia Tercios. I'm with the Mayor's Office of Community Relations and Services. So unfortunately on Sunday around 5 p.m., 9 individuals were shot on the 3600 block of 14th Street, and unfortunately one of the individuals succumbed to his injuries. And the mayor and Chief Newsham held a press conference the day of and addressed the targeted shooting and addressed that illegal guns were a part of this tragic incident. So we want to make sure that we are reporting any illegal guns that we do see. But after the event, we have conducted outreach from our office with community members, ANC 1A, and we also did invite Ali from Councilmember Nadeau's office. I believe Oscar attended. It was on Tuesday, so that was great just to see everybody come together. We engaged various businesses, neighbors, just to show them that we are out there. We are trying to help in any way that we can, whether that's connecting them to DCRA services, mental health services. We do understand that some of business owners were there, that some of them did witness what happened, and we want them to know that. I'm so sorry. I don't know how my sentence triggered Siri. I just turned it off. I'm so sorry. But we just want community members to know that we are here to provide support in any ways we can, as the city can. And we want to make sure that we're all working on this together. It's not a one-stop solution. We want to make sure that we're approaching this in every way, like Calvin did mention in the beginning as well. MPD was out there yesterday engaging the neighbors, providing lunch to a lot of the neighbors that hang out. We do understand that some people do like to hang out, which is perfectly fine. We just want to make sure that people have their masks on. So I know that they did also share some masks with them. Derek from MPD was also out there. Derek is the outreach coordinator, and I'm happy to share his information as well. He joined the walk, and I'll put his information in the chat. I'm not sure if he's on the call today, but happy to answer any questions that you all have. And then if I don't have the answer at this time, happy to come back and share that with Commissioner Bonneau or at the next meeting next month or in September.
Cynthia, you were saying the MPD was using resources without food?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I don't know.
You were
why.
saying the MPD was handing out food?
Yes, they posted on social media as well that they were handing out some lunches yesterday on the 3600 block, as many people were hanging out around there, and they just shared some meals with them.
So I think we have a great question in the chat from neighbor Rose Schneider, who's pointing out that a lot of the businesses in the area of the shooting are Hispanic, and asking what approaches are being planned that makes best use of their community cohesion and collaboration. And so, you know, Cynthia, if you want to start, but appreciate that the council member is on as well.
So we do understand that many of the businesses are Spanish speaking. I know that on Monday, Director Reyes from the Mayor's Office of Latino Affairs was out there, and she's working with them at this time to assist them in different ways. We're collaborating on that as well. So I'm touching base with her to understand how we can all better work together, but we do understand that sometimes there are different needs, and we want to make sure that everyone knows that all these resources are available in different languages, and that's something we do emphasize. And if it's a language we don't speak, we are happy to work with them and just connect them to the language access line. Like I said, every single resource that the city has, we can translate in whatever language is needed for residents and everyone to be included.
Thanks, Cynthia. So I'll just share, you know, the 3600 block of 14th Street, I think some of the conversation in the chat has pointed out different activities that we've seen there, and just it is definitely an area of need. That's like the end of Ward 1. It's an area that we've brought attention to a lot. And so I won't speak for others, but council member, if you can share just sort of what some of the supports either have been or could be to address like a lot of the issues we're seeing on that block, I think would be helpful.
Sure, and if you'll indulge me, I'll just go back a step too and add to what Cynthia said about the incident, the shooting that happened on Sunday. So I've been council member in Ward 1 for 6 years. We've seen the persistent issues like the drug use and the sex work that whole time and much longer before, because these are deeper issues. And so I will talk about that a little bit too, and sort of how we're thinking about that at the council and the resources that we need to address those issues for the community and for the people who are experiencing addiction and performing sex work. But let's start with what led us to Sunday. I think it's really important to understand that all the different types of crime that exist in our community have different types of interventions. The most concerning crime in our community is, of course, violence. And as Bob mentioned, and as CJ discussed, the work of the NEAR Act and the shift of the government to approaching violence like a disease through public health interventions is relatively new and rather poorly funded as compared to, say, the police force. And so this is one of the challenges we face. But let me say, you know, historically in the District of Columbia, we have what we call crews. Those are sort of like a local gang. You know, there was a time in the district where they were committing acts of violence all the time and back and forth. That is not the time that we are in now. Now crews are, for the most part, social networks, social systems, a community that people who have, you know, created their family through their neighborhood can rely on. And yet at sometimes the crews have conflicts that do erupt into violence. And so that is what happened Sunday. There is a crew in Ward 6 that has an issue with our crew that exists on Meridian. And because of some efforts to sort of move the Meridian crew off the block to quiet that block down, they started hanging out on 14th Street. It is probably logical to most people to sort of think that the crime that we always see on 14th Street could be related to something this horrific. But in fact, there's really no evidence that the people who were being shot at and the people who came to shoot at them have anything to do whatsoever with the other activity that we see on 14th Street. So we have to think about addressing them in different ways through different tactics. The way that we address that type of violence, and I will say, if I didn't say it already, I mean, having 9 people shot in the middle of the day in our community is terrifying and horrifying. The fact that illegal weapons were used, semi-automatic weapons, long guns, is terrifying. And none of us should ever have to live through that. And it's not okay. And so that's why we're bringing all the resources we can to identifying who did it, to finding those guns and confiscating those guns. But also, when you think about what caused the violence, it's the conflict between the two groups. And that's why tonight's guest was perfect, because what we do when those conflicts are happening is we mediate. We mediate, we get them to sit down and talk out their issues so that it doesn't continue, so that it doesn't persist. And that is what we're doing in this scenario as well. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people involved who are in the hospital. So I believe it was Bob or CJ who mentioned part of the NEAR Act is having people in hospitals who help prevent that retaliation, working with the victims and their families. So all of that is going on right now related to this violence. I'm sure I left out some things, so people can feel free to ask questions. You can express skepticism, you can express rage, frustration. That's what elected officials are here for, so we can help understand, how people are feeling and also explain what we're doing to address them. I really do want to say that Cynthia and Jasmine have been just doing tremendous work coordinating all the different government agencies. So we had, victims of the shooting. We have sort of the outer, it's sort of a ripple effect, right? Just like a disease, violence, it ripples into the neighborhood, into the side streets. Those of you who heard it, who were there, you're feeling trauma as well. And we do have resources in our Department of Behavioral Health for anybody who needs counseling or who wants to talk it through with someone. You can be experiencing trauma without even realizing it. And given all that's going on with the pandemic and the isolation we all feel, we need to remember that there are resources for that. Okay. So that was a lot, but I'm not quite done. The other thing is the businesses, and Cynthia talked about that a lot. So Cynthia waited all night for DCRA to come out and board up the windows and make sure that everybody was safe. But those business owners that were there when it happened are also going through a lot of trauma. And the Office of Latino Affairs is a great resource there and has been out and engaging with them. We want to make sure they have the supports. We also have a Main Street program in that area, which is a support system to all businesses. And they've been working with us and working to support the businesses in this instance as well. So the question was actually about 2 comments that had been made, which is what are we doing regarding the day-to-day crime that we see? Now, this is a really key part of the conversation we've been having around how do you shift resources to the interventions that are going to really solve these types of crimes. So the council voted on the budget today, and it was a really tense budget this year. Money was tighter than ever, but as the chair of the Human Services Committee, my focus has been on ending homelessness, on ensuring that we have supportive services to people. As a member of the Health Committee, I've had a large focus on behavioral health, which is mental health and addiction. But those programs have not been funded at the levels that we need them to be, despite my best efforts to add money every year. I think that until we have a really robust continuum of care in our behavioral health system, where people can really pick up the phone anytime and get the supports they need, but not just a hotline, but like being able to enter care when they're ready, we're not really going to be able to solve the issues that we have throughout the city with addiction and with unemployment and all of the issues that we're seeing, especially in the corridor here. So that's part of it, but that's a focus I've had, and we're continuing to increase funding there. And that's the other thing, is that I'm working with HIPS, which is an organization that serves sex workers, to introduce some legislation in the fall to actually give their organization more of a formal relationship with the government and a more consistent funding stream, because they really operate on a shoestring right now, providing services to sex workers to help keep them safe, help them get housed if they choose to find other types of jobs. And that is, so that's going to be a focus of mine in the fall as well. Let's see, I want to just check the chat here, but I can talk more about the budget if people want.
Council member, there was a question asking about, I think it was from Jenna, where you said to quiet things down on Meridian, the crew moved over to 14th and Spring, and like, what does that mean?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly what happened. So the crew was hanging out, literally just hanging out on Meridian, which is where a lot of them are from. It's a place that they often hang out. There's a church parking lot there that was being used basically for parties every night. And it was really disruptive to the neighborhood. It's one of those things where it's like, people want the police to solve that, but it's not really the kind of thing police can solve, because the issue is they are hanging out and they don't have a better place to go, right? But they got a little more confrontational with neighbors passing by. And so then it became more of a public safety issue, truly. And so what happened was, first we worked with the church to secure the lot. So there was less of a private property for them to hang out on, sort of shifted them to the sidewalks. It didn't really solve the problem. You're going to see a theme here about shifting things. And then MPD brought in the security camera on the block as a deterrent, and they decided that it just wasn't worth it to be there and be on film anymore. And so they left the block. And there, somewhere in there also, there had been a daytime shooting where someone had come up looking for someone in Meridian and shot at them. And so this was going on for a month. And I'll say this, Meridian has not been a hot crew. I mean, there hasn't been a conflict with them. And so this all has happened rather recently. And we're still trying to understand what the conflict is between these two crews. And that's part of solving and ending the violence. And the people who work on that work at the organization called Collaborative Solutions. They're our Ward 1 contractor as part of the Office of Neighborhood and Safety and Engagement, doing what we call violence interruption. They do prevention, they do immediate intervention, they do mediation, they do ceasefire. They've been around Ward 1 a long time. They're the ones who've gotten the ceasefires over the years with the Latino gangs, MS-13 and 18th Street, that still exist in our communities, but have been, I hate to say these things because I feel like I'm jinxing them, but they've been in a ceasefire because of the work of the organization. So they basically, Meridian felt like, we don't like hanging out on the block anymore, so we're going to go somewhere else that we can hang. And so we knew they had relocated. We were still talking with them, trying to figure out what the conflict was about. I say we, but Collaborative Solutions does that work. And then this happened. So, you know, it's really frustrating, and that's not, you know, that word isn't strong enough for such a tragic event, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. So, does that make sense?
Thank you. Is there anyone that wants to come off mute? And it doesn't have to be a question. It can be building off what you shared during your introduction of like why you're here. I just want to make sure, this is hard since we're not in person, but I do think some of the purpose of tonight is to process together. And so, yeah, Mariana.
Sorry, I was coming off mute and turned off my camera. Yeah, thank you so much, Commissioner. That is a really helpful overview of what happened. I think, you know, many of us have been somewhat dumbfounded, really feeling like there's no explanation. So having at least some sense of that, I think makes a difference. Some of my neighbors are on this call as well. You know, and what we experienced was much of what you read about if you didn't experience it, right? Which is like very loud noises. There's been fireworks. We went to see why the fireworks were so loud and fast. And, you know, for me personally, it like took my brain quite a bit to process that it was gunfire, because I'd never seen or experienced that before, nor had I ever seen that type of gun, frankly.
Yeah.
One of the residents of our building, two of the residents of our building had to like hit the sidewalk. They were outside cleaning their bikes and fled, and then ran into our, you know, fled and like ran into our balcony. And, you know, our top floor neighbors have a 1-year-old newborn baby, and they saw it. They all saw it as well. So it's obviously like a horrific thing to have seen. It's a horrific thing to know happens in your area, etc. I think, you know, speaking for myself and for my neighbors who I know well, we all understand that this violence is a result of a confluence of structural factors, many of which are exacerbated by the COVID-19 issue and, you know, the respective job loss and health issues and tensions from being trapped in quarantine, etc. With that said, since living in this neighborhood, you know, we also see that there is like a locus of crime here. And so I think what I'd like to understand is, you know, what is the strategy to address the crime that's happening, which feels like there isn't any movement on, number one. Number two, you know, if the issue is that the effective violence interruption services are underfunded, what's the strategy to get the funding? And then finally, there are things in the neighborhood that like we can deal with ourselves. So like the empty lots full of trash, we can do it. You know, if we have a permit, or I don't even know if we need a permit, but like there's one across the street from our building, it needs a wall, it needs to be cleaned up. And like, those are the types of things that I would like to see us taking on.
Okay. And I also, Mariana, I'll answer that. And let's see, also, Lily talked about, you know, the police presence not really being a deterrent, and I could talk about that. And Delatus asked, you know, she said what we're doing isn't working. So let me sort of see if I can answer. And what I'll do is I'm gonna pull from some stuff I prepared in anticipation of those questions. And then if I haven't gotten to all of it, you could ping me again in the chat and I'll make sure that I follow up. Okay, so a couple things. The easy one is Office of the Clean City, DC will give you everything you need to do a cleanup. I highly recommend block cleanups. That's how I got my start in the community, getting to know my neighbors. And given that street cleaning has been suspended, the entire health emergency, there's a need for that as well. So Office of the Clean City, Allie is probably gonna be putting this in chat, anticipating me asking her to do it, their contact info. Oh, and Rose also said, you know, how we need to reallocate resources. So let me talk about that too. So we, I think I mentioned earlier that the NEAR Act is just beginning to be implemented, our public health approach. Even though it was passed more than 3 years ago, there hasn't been complete buy-in into this through government, meaning council passed it. And we've spent a lot of time really building the buy-in in the executive branch. And I think we really have it now in a way that we didn't in the beginning, because we're starting to see how violence interruption works, but also how when we give people the opportunity to do something other than commit crime, like we give them a real job, they'll make that choice every day because it's a better choice for them, for their friends and their family. So we have a program called Pathways that we've increased the funding for by 1/3 this year. That is a 9-week intensive wraparound program. If you are somebody who's been involved in violence, you would be eligible for this program, and we identify that through the work that the different community partners do on the ground, and connecting people to the programs. You get mental health, trauma-informed care, wraparound services. Your family gets that type of support too. You get job training, and at the end you get a job. To hear the testimony in council of the folks who've gone through this program is really moving, and the way that it's changed their life and the way they've really moved on. Now, the thing to remember is it seems like, okay, that's one starfish at a time, right? There's not that many people in the District of Columbia actually committing violence. There's 702,000 people who live here. Maybe 400 of them are involved with violence. That doesn't even mean that they're all shooters, right? We can solve this by actually investing in these programs. So it's been little by little. The challenge with Pathways is not just money, it's also making sure there's a job at the end. The deputy mayor is really good at explaining this, and I've learned a lot from him on it, but it's something that he's focused on, and I've tried to help also by connecting his office with the unions and some other businesses, but that's the kind of thing. I mean, everything's harder during COVID, of course, but we're still expanding these programs. So you have this combination of the street teams that are doing engagement, that are working on ceasefires, that are identifying people who could make a different choice and getting them into this program. And then you have the other services that we need to invest in. But I also want to come back to one thing that I didn't say earlier about the shooting. One of the things that made this so distinct was the type of weapons used. We have some of the strongest gun laws in the District of Columbia, and MPD gets guns off the street all year. They're not from here. You can't buy those weapons legally in the District of Columbia. I have passed more laws since I got into office too to make it harder to buy guns, but also also easier to report them. And in this budget, we also are spending more money doing a public information campaign around the red flag law that I introduced in 2018. So this allows a family member, domestic partner, mental health professional, or police officer to remove a firearm or ammunition, and the courts will uphold that, and that's preemptively, right? So it's often hard to remove a weapon preemptively. We've seen that too many times with school shootings where someone is giving all the signs. So that law will help. The violence that we see in our city, if we did not have the guns, these would be knife fights or fist fights. You know, it sounds kind of silly to say it that way, but when we think about it, we need to stop the flow of guns. So the most important thing I think that has happened in this regard is Virginia this year passing the background checks and the 1 gun a month law, because until then, people could just go to Virginia, go to a gun show, load up their trunk, drive back and sell the guns illegally in the District of Columbia. And so that's what you see. So that, and we're working on tracing ghost guns, which are the ones you can buy on the internet, sort of partially assembled and then finish them at home. So we've given MPD some more tools on those things. Rose is right when she says we need to fund more things that actually solve problems. When you think about somebody who was doing drugs on the street, there's a couple ways you can address that. Yes, you could call the police, but what's going to happen is they might do a citation, they might do an arrest, they might do sort of a misdemeanor charge, and then they're back out on the street doing drugs again because they have an addiction, which is a disease. And so really a better way to address that is through addiction counseling and services and rehab and helping them. The same way that we get people into the Pathways program for violent behavior, getting people into a continuum of care for behavioral health is what helps them stop doing drugs. And if there's no more customers, then you don't have as much drug dealing. And I know that sounds like the longest term plan of all time, but hard things do take time and hard things take a commitment. And addiction is a really difficult disease. And a lot of the crimes that we see in the corridor are really people who are hurting themselves, right? Through drugs or through other behaviors that make us feel uncomfortable, but aren't escalating to the violence that hurts others, if that makes sense. So in this year's budget, the police force was going to be getting a $19 million enhancement from the mayor, and they have almost $600 million a year. And we have more police per capita than any city in the country. We have almost 3,000 police officers, to the point that the police were present further up when this happened. This other incident happened. It wasn't, police have a presence on 14th and Spring. It doesn't deter day-to-day altercations and drug use. Yeah. So their presence can deter some crime. Like, I don't want to discount that completely. I mean, I think there is data that shows, say, for like robberies, which are also, you know, that's a thing that impacts your life. Their presence can deter that. With a shooting, that's a crime of passion. And a crime of passion is something that happens without someone thinking. And a lot of the crime that we see, I don't want everyone to think, just because I started off talking about crews, that we have like a rampant crew violence situation in the district. And I saw Commissioner Miller asked about the crews further down 14th Street. This was unrelated to that. Those are different groups. But a lot of the violence we've seen in the district in the past several years is personal disputes that escalate. Like, you called my girlfriend a name, or you stepped on my foot, or you took my jacket, or things that like really belie the fact that we have not done a good job in society of giving people coping mechanisms. And then if they have access to guns, that's when we're seeing the violence. So think about that. We invested an additional $5.5 million in behavioral health in this budget. It was supposed to be $9.1 million. There was a cut in the budget today that I vehemently protested. I lost. I was only one of 2 people that voted against the cut. The cut came because the ad industry didn't want to get taxed 3%. So we can talk about that another time. Someone who wants to be wonky with me, but I'm still pretty ticked about it, because I can see as a ward council member how not having that continuum of care in our behavioral health system is impacting everybody in the community day to day. I mean, the people on the street who are addicted and the people on the street who are drunk, those are just the ones we can see, right? We know people are struggling inside their homes as well. And all of us are struggling right now with mental health during this pandemic. So it's just not a good time to cut corners on that type of work. Let me go back to the police budget for a second. I digressed. So the mayor was increasing it by 19 million. There were calls for major cuts to the police budget. We were only able to cut 15 million from that enhancement. And critics will tell you, and they are correct, that if you only cut 15 million from a $19 million enhancement, the police are still getting an enhancement, right? There were legal challenges with why we couldn't cut certain things, but I can tell you what we did cut for those of you who are interested. I personally feel like these were minor cuts, and I know that, and I work every day with the police, and I do, you know, I have respect working side by side for them for all of the work that they do, and they are, you know, fighting with us over that cut, and that's their right to do, but I disagree with their approach on that, and they know it. So we cut $9.6 million in operating funds, meaning day-to-day money. $6 million is from vacant positions, meaning nobody got fired. We're just not gonna let them hire anymore in those positions. And that's a very typical thing to do in a budget. We all do that. We do that in the Human Services Committee too. We took $2 million from the mayor's proposed expansion of the police cadet program, which is new incoming police, and $900,000 from travel, ballistics, shields, and public relations. I don't think anybody cares that we cut their PR budget. I don't think anybody cares that we cut their travel budget. I think there are people who are thrilled that we cut their ballistics and shield budget, because remember, those are the things that have been used downtown at the protests, the militarization of the police force, okay? So cutting those things is useful and responsive to the discussion about disarming the police, demilitarizing the police, protecting our residents who have been traumatized by the police. And we have people in Ward 1 who've been traumatized in those protests and beyond. We have one constituent in Adams Morgan who's blind in one eye now because he was hit in the eye with a pepper ball at Lafayette Square. So these are things to put in context. There's all kinds of violence and trauma in our community, and some of it has been from these incidents. We also took $5.5 million in capital cuts, meaning, well, I'll explain. Police cruisers, so new cars. Evidence impound lot renovations, which I think nobody, you know, I don't think anybody was going to fight over that. And then the Wi-Fi expansion project, which is probably a useful thing, but they'll, I guess, have to be on 5G or something else. So those were the cuts. And I am the first to admit that I don't think we made enough. And also, you know, it's not going to be that painful for the police. But I'm going to tell you also where we're putting it so you can understand what good it will do. And then we can talk about, and I know it's getting late, I'm sorry, but this is important and it seems like you guys do really care about this stuff. So I will take the opportunity to talk about it. So we're restoring funds to the Violence Interruption Program under the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement and the Office of the Attorney General. I didn't say earlier, the Attorney General has been a huge partner in violence prevention and also the work we do with youth who are involved with crime and their diversion and rehabilitation. It also funds stipends for the Pathways program I mentioned earlier. People don't leave crime unless they have a better option. So we do a subsidized work program at the end of that intensive program, and then they get into permanent work. I mentioned the public information campaign around my red flag law. We are adding new staff to the Office of the Attorney General's Truancy Mediation program, which helps parents and students work through underlying issues that may be causing the student to miss school. We transferred funds to a reentry housing program to help. So remember, when we have citizens returning from incarceration, it's a really difficult time for them to come back into community. We need to support them. These programs do that. This also helps them prevent becoming a reoffender and, you know, rejoining our society in a positive way. We made permanent the Criminal Code Reform Commission, which establishes an independent agency to pursue criminal code reform and best practices in criminal law. Lots of conversations in the District of Columbia about decriminalizing low-level crime. Remember, we did it with marijuana because it was understood that smoking marijuana doesn't really hurt anybody but yourself, maybe. And so we decriminalized it. There's a lot of discussion about other things that need to be decriminalized. We did decriminalize metro fare evasion a couple years ago. I'm working on decriminalizing street vending. You know, these are the things that we're looking at. We restored funds to the Justice Grants Program at the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, and we invested funds to complete plans to build a new shelter for domestic violence victims and survivors. So I talked a lot. I know there's some questions in chat. I also want to defer to our co-chairs. You can just tell me to shut up and move on, and I can take some questions in writing later as well. I know you would never say it like that, but you're welcome to.
Thanks, Council Member. Commissioner Castañón.
Oh, I just noticed that there's a few questions in the chat. I don't know if we want to start lifting some of those up before people hop off. I want to also be fair to those that came first. Sorry.
Yeah, we knew tonight would kind of be a confluence with like the vote on the budget, the Sunday shooting. So appreciate just the variety of issues folks are raising in the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking at the questions. They're really good. I don't know if they're still pending.
So Will had one on if guns in these crimes typically are acquired legally or illegally. And I think I heard you say that for Sunday it was illegal.
Yeah,
I didn't want to speak broadly.
It's very hard to buy a firearm in the District of Columbia. First of all, no semi-automatic weapons are legal ever. In order to buy a gun in the District of Columbia, you have to make your case before a panel of people about why you need a gun. None of these people are doing that. These are all illegal weapons.
I know that there was also a question about the sex work that's going on 14th Street, and maybe you want to speak to, I guess, how HIPS loops into that conversation and what's currently being done around sex work.
Yeah, so there is legislation in the council to decriminalize sex work. It is probably not going to move this year. I think it's sort of just, it's not going to get out of committee because of the composition of the Judiciary Committee right now. Its proposal is to fully legalize sex work so that it is legal both to buy it and sell it. That sort of became one of the controversial points because there was a group that was concerned that that could increase human trafficking. So we had a very robust dialogue. I supported this legislation. I think there's more discussion to be had around the legalization of the purchase. I don't think there's really any controversy around the legalization of the sale because there's an acknowledgement in the District of Columbia, which tends to be very open-minded that there's reasons people do sex work that are very legitimate, and that they should not be arrested and should not have a criminal record for doing so. And so that needs a legislative fix. And I know I've been talking with Council Member Allen, who's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee this week, a lot actually about legalization, because we've been working on street vendors together. We have, unfortunately, some of our street vendors in the ward haven't been able to be licensed for various reasons, and we're working very hard to get that to happen. But in the meantime, you should not be able to be arrested because you're vending without a license, right? I mean, it's just, nobody cares. They're not hurting anybody, right? So I'm working first on getting that brought down to just a citation, but really we've been working very closely with them on getting licensed so that that's not an issue at all. But really that's been a big issue. With the sex work, so, you know, I would urge anyone who's really interested in this to look at HIPS and understand their mission. Their goal is to support sex workers. Now, for some people really feel like sex work is bad and people shouldn't do it, and that maybe they're being forced to do it. But there's other people who believe, and we have constituents who are sex workers who say, you know what, this is my work and I'm proud of it, and this is what I do to make a living. So you have to be open-minded in this conversation. And also, I think for those of us who have privilege, people like me with white skin, that was a revolutionary idea for me, that someone would choose that profession. But it's something that people do choose. And so I'm learning and I'm trying to understand better so that I can lead better on this issue. That said, I mean, one of the things that could occur once sex work is legalized is that it's not forced into alleys. It's not a dangerous profession because it can be professionalized. And so that's what's being asked of us as a government when we're being asked to decriminalize or legalize prostitution, is how do we bring that profession out of the shadows so that it's safe for the people who do it, so that they have the supports they need so that they can make a living, and ultimately for the community who doesn't like seeing it, then it doesn't have to be out in public and on the street. So it's sort of a win-win. It really, you get to pick which part you're interested in, but that's the discussion that's happening right now around it. HIPS provides like needle exchange and condoms and food and support and counseling, and you can use the computers there, you can get a shower. Not everybody who does sex work is homeless, but for those who are, there's that type of support too.
I just want to add, and I know there's other people who have questions, I just want to add, if you're interested in some action items after this meeting, I really encourage you to look up HIPS. They have plenty of volunteer opportunities. I mean, you probably won't get to volunteer until after COVID, but things that you can do, they pass out materials on safe sex, condoms. You can also be part of like the whole needle exchange program. These are all programs that are very beneficial to the residents in our community. And again, they have plenty of opportunities for you to volunteer. I know a lot of us feel very helpless in this situation. Unfortunately, there are organizations in our ward where you can volunteer and feel like you are contributing to the solutions. And I know a few people had their hands raised, or I thought I saw people.
Well, I'm going to take a prerogative, Commissioner, just ask one quick question, and that is, let's imagine a world where we do decriminalize or even legalize. Is there any discussion right now about the where? Then it becomes a zoning question about, well, it's a business, and where are you going to allow those businesses?
The vending, you mean? The vending or the sex work?
I'm talking about the vending and the sex work, quite frankly.
Okay.
I'm okay with both, but I would like to know where that's going to happen.
Okay, so we haven't gotten far enough in the conversation about the sex work to talk about the where, but I do, from what I've understood from the workers themselves, they'd prefer to be able to do it in their own homes. And if it's not illegal, then you're not being you don't risk your lease, right? So
sorry, if people saw me laughing, it's because Commissioner Ray heads up our zoning committee. So obviously that's like where he went with this conversation.
The zoning nerd. Okay. So to answer your question though, about basically what you're asking is like, this is public space. Where's everybody going to go? Right. I mean, like, okay. So right now we already have this issue in Columbia Heights. There's a moratorium on street vending licenses in Columbia Heights because of all the retail and the foot traffic and ADA compliance, et cetera, et cetera. That's part of our problem. The vendors who have been pushed to Columbia Heights out of Adams Morgan, other places, have nowhere to vend legally. So we're working on that. We actually came up with a map with DDOT about, you know, where the permits could go. You know, so everybody would have their spot and their permit would correspond to a map. And so that's the way we're thinking about it. We're a long ways off from that right now, unfortunately, because the licensing scheme is complicated. You have to get certified Department of Health training, which we've actually organized for them. You have to have special equipment. You have to have the DCRA license. You have to have clean hands, meaning no fines. So for people who've been ticketed for illegal vending, we have to figure out how to pay back those fines for them, which we're going to work on too. But the critical thing for me right now is the decrim, because right now people call the police, and then that's a police interaction with the vendor. So what I've been negotiating with MPD is, if you call them, they're going to come. Partially because if you don't come, they're going to get yelled at. So what we did this week, when there was a situation where somebody had called the police on the vendors, so I called the commander and I said, look, I know you have a job to do, and so do I, and I want to protect these vendors, and I know you have better things to do than being out there interacting with them. And he said, okay, we will refer it to DCRA, and we will leave it alone. And that's what decrim would do. I don't love that people are calling. I mean, it's not good that people are calling the police on the vendors. But if we decriminalize it and they call the police and the police say, this is not our area, please call 311 and DCRA can come out and do an inspection, which is much better if those are our options. But that's where we are right now.
I do just want to echo what I said at the start of the meeting about the importance of people having homes. I mean, we've talked about stay at home during the coronavirus as a phrase we'll all forever now know, stay at home. When it comes to sex work, when it comes to drug usage, when it comes to loitering on the street side, it's because people don't have homes or places that they can go safely to engage in a lot of that. If we talk about the district budget, again, follow the money. 11 of the 13 council members' #1 donors are real estate and developers. What's being built in our community? Affordable housing or luxury condos, 1-bedroom units. There's going to be 40 1-bedroom units that go up across my street that are going to be prohibitively expensive, keeping people out on the streets. That is going to continue the violence. The mayor, look at who donates to the mayor. She's a big time donor for major developers across the board. And so when we're not investing in housing, the Housing Production Trust Fund, which is the main fund we pulled from, is nearly $100 million. We need to build hundreds of thousands of units to be able to address this issue. And we have $130 million. And we have $2 billion, we wanted another just stat here, $2 billion of repairs at our public housing units. People are living in disrepair and they have no other choice but to bring themselves out on the street that lead to these issues of violence. So we need to be able to elect officials that are going to be held accountable on where their money comes from and where it goes, because we can work around the edges with violence interruption programs for a few $1 million. But if we're not substantially building housing, giving people safe places to engage in, we're going to constantly see this type of street violence that is obviously on the top of all of our minds.
Thank you, Bob. Does someone else have a question?
I'm also answering questions in the chat right now for people that we haven't gotten to.
Thank you.
Laura, I know you responded in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to go off mute and add anything. No problem. I know not everyone can be unmuted.
If it's okay, Mariana asked, she also mentioned she's in the biz and so she wouldn't have minded the tax. She says she agrees with everything I said, so I had to say that. But also, why has the council declined to raise taxes? We don't really have time for my full answer on this. I have actually raised taxes a couple times in the last 2 budget cycles and directed the money to, I've cut taxes, I've raised taxes on businesses and sent the money to human services and housing, and this time mental health, school-based mental health, Commissioner Miller's favorite project, and to excluded workers and to early childhood. All the things that I think this group cares about. My amendments have passed both times overwhelmingly, and I think it's partially because we work really hard to build coalitions on the council and to whip votes and to get that done. And also, there was really nobody complaining about the tax that I did. There were maybe like 1 or 2 businesses. When the chairman and David Grasso tried to raise the ad tax, there were thousands of businesses that were upset about it. And it was a really complex thing because it wasn't just like newspapers and advertising business. It was also the small businesses that pay for the ads. And so in the middle of the pandemic, it was like, oh, these businesses are trying to get up off their feet. These are the little guys. These are the ones we care about. This could hurt them. And so there was like a real step back from it. So it was complicated. I was ready to vote for it in place. The chairman Tuesday actually recessed the meeting so that we couldn't vote on it. And you can roll the tape. I had some choice words, but basically, so what he did today, he said, I'm going to recess the meeting so we can find $18 million somewhere else. And he did, and it involved a cut to behavioral health. And it involved a bunch of maneuvers that I was ticked about because it was stuff he's always told us we're not allowed to do, that he gets to do. Because if I was allowed to do it, I would have taken it last week and already reallocated it to all these programs. So those are the politics of it. And I voted against his amendment today because it not only cut $4 million from behavioral health services, it actually changed some funding for homeless services and youth services from what we call recurring dollars, meaning there was money for 5 years, to one-time money, meaning there's only money for this year. He took it, reallocated the out years, and that meant that we lost like $9.5 million worth of human services investments. People don't think about it because they're like, oh, it's funded this year, but it means next year I have to find it, and the year after I have to find it, and the year after I have to find it, when I had actually already found it for 5 years and then took those other 4 years away. So budget season is really important. And we're basically done with this year's budget season, but if you're interested, sign up for a newsletter, and we'll put it in the chat. You'll get all the updates and you'll find out when you can sign up for testimony, because it does matter. I mean, that influx of emails is what changed the tax. And, you know, I wish it hadn't.
I believe we have a question from Mariana.
Thanks. And sorry, I know I've been talking a lot, but I'm quite passionate about this. So what I'm baffled about in the current situation is the fact that, you know, probably not all of us on this call, but many of us on this call have retained our high-paying jobs in spite of the COVID pandemic, while our neighbors have not, while we are doing fine, while, and in many cases even decreased our expenses, while our neighbors are struggling with poverty. I just received for the first time a tax refund of my mortgage interest, which was like a bunch of money that I, now being in a position to be able to afford a mortgage, don't actually need. Yeah. And I'm like just a little bit like speechless that the possibility of just like raising taxes on those of us who have more income to pay the taxes is not like something that's been more in discussion.
So we had Councilmember Allen did an amendment to increase income tax on people making over $250,000 a year, and it would have been such a small increase, like maybe $1,400 for somebody making that much money. It's a small increase, right? And it failed 5 to 8. And I know, well, so there's going to be a new council next year. And I know that this is a government meeting, but I can encourage you to vote. And I can tell you that the at-large race, which is the nonpartisan race in the general election, is critical to the composition of the council. Okay? Do your research. You can ask me offline who I'm voting for. I may make an endorsement, in which case it'll be obvious, but I can tell you that every time I have to do something important and difficult, I have to get to 7 votes. And getting to 7 is very hard on some of these issues. So vote for people that care about the issues that you do and who have a record of delivering on them. Bob's right. Campaign finance is a good way of understanding someone's values. And you know what? If public financing had existed in my last campaign, I would use it. If I run again, I'm going to use it. And you know, it's okay. I mean, I have no problem with anyone criticizing me for where the money comes from in my campaign, but I can tell you that my record reflects that my priorities are my constituents. My priorities are these issues. And so I think that's what matters at the end of the day. Of course, it's what matters at the end of the day. But I get the argument and I'm not offended by it. And even if I was, I know, Bob, that doesn't matter in this context. But look at those things. Look at who's taking public financing and who's not. You know, look at what people have done in their careers and what their track record is. Ask me offline and I'll give you some more insights. I'm excited about Janice joining the council in Ward 4. Really excited about it. You know, I'm hoping it's a new day next year and that we can do more of this. I also want to warn folks that the chairman has, he's accelerating the hearing on the tax revision commission because he thinks that we raise taxes willy-nilly and we should go back to the commission deciding which taxes to raise. And that's really gonna screw up my rogue progressive funding streams. But if the public shows up also to the tax revision commission hearings, then you will be able to talk about raising income tax and you will be able to talk about taxing business and you'll be able to talk about prioritizing the things that we value. So.
Thanks. So we're getting a lot of great questions in terms of like next steps and building community and the relationship piece. Also, depending where you are in the ward, there's like a major storm coming through. So I hope everyone is being safe. And so, yeah, just like great suggestions in terms of volunteering, donating, voting this November. And we learned that all the ballots are getting mailed out. So that's really great. I'm going to plug the census as well, because we've seen this increase in density in our area and we really want the funding for different services to reflect those accurate numbers. So it's all interconnected. It looks like August 20th will be our August Public Safety and Coalition meeting. And so we'll definitely get that out on people's calendars. If you are available to join us, we'll continue in the virtual setting. And I'm willing to stay on till 9 and would love to hear from folks in the chat or unmuting just some of these like more near-term next steps, either like something you learned on the call that you're committing to do as an individual or a neighbor, or a pressing question that you still have that you want to make sure that as we look at the next steps and continue the conversation, we're addressing. And I think Harrison posted in the chat just talking about the fights people are getting into on the streets, and this isn't leading to the shootings, but people are being assaulted in clearly unhealthy sex work relationships. Okay, it's going back to kind of some of the activity we're seeing on 3600. And he said that blaming societal trends seems like an easy out and unhelpful to the people in distress. And so I think this goes to a lot of you have brought up sort of like, what's the short, medium, and long-term solutions around this, and like, what does that look like? And so definitely have started a lot of good conversations tackling pieces of that, but would love to hear from you all as well.
Question for the council member. Did we get enough money into the behavioral health budget to get some of our street users, street vendors, in the privacy of their home vendors, into treatment, or no?
I don't think there's enough to do it wide with the intensity that we need. So what that means is that I will be fighting the wards for the resource, which you know I will do. But with that cut, we also lost a federal match. It always ticks me off because it's like we lost twice the money.
Money, yeah.
More than twice because it's like a 70% match. Yeah. It's just not, and it's not enough anyway. Right? I think our director now is like, she's really top notch. So she's going to do whatever she can with the funding she has. But the thing that I've been pressing her on since day one is not only the street outreach, but the continuum of care. And I did see Harrison's question, like blaming societal trends seems like an easy out and unhelpful to the people in distress. I mean, I don't know if I'm trying to blame it, but I do think that's how we got here, right? And to fix it, we have to undo it. And it didn't happen overnight. And so it's not going to be fixed overnight. If you think about the fighting and things like that, oftentimes that's happening when people are high or drunk. So it really does go back to the behavioral health interventions. I know Commissioner Castagnon had done some really great work on the plaza with the men who were suffering from alcoholism, and they were largely a peaceful group. And then all of a sudden there was this not so peaceful group that came in, and it made it more difficult for her to do that work because it was putting her at risk. And so those are times where we really do need a higher level of behavioral health crisis intervention. And the challenge right now is to be safe. If you're being threatened, the most expedient thing to do is call 911, and they will send the police. But that does not necessarily lead to the real intervention that you need. What we need to be able to do is call 911 and get the behavioral health interventionist to come out, and for them to be staffed at the same level, that it's not like, oh, they can't come because they're in Northeast right now, right? Like the whole conversation around defunding police is predicated on the fact that you have to have something to replace them with in all of these areas. And we're not doing that at the scale we need to do it still. So, as much pressure as there was on the council this year to make those changes, we moved the needle, but like, folks, it's gotta be more than moving the needle. And so we've got to really, really revolutionize what we're doing here. It starts with the mayor, because the problem is the mayor has the first pass at the budget. And then we're moving the deck chairs around at the council. So I'm proud of what we did, and at the same time acknowledging that it's not enough. It's not even close to enough.
Councilmember, I did want to point out, because you weren't on that call, we had an ANC call with the chief a couple of weeks ago, following the whole defund movement, and he certainly seemed open to exactly what you're saying, that if we're willing to move responsibilities from the police over to behavioral health, that's the kind of conversation he would like to have. So
yeah,
I mean,
he actually said that to me in the budget hearing too.
Yeah.
And also he said, yeah, we need to look at decriminalizing a lot of these things. Because like, do you really want the police out arresting someone for like an open container? I mean, is that really the best use of their time / the best intervention for the person drinking outside? Like, as a community, is that what we want? I don't. Delatus asked, I'm confused, who has the power to do the things I just talked about? Council does, but as I said earlier, people have to show up and vote for council members that are gonna be willing to do this. I'm only one. And I get
it. Yeah, this is Chander. That same sentiment was echoed by a whole panel that a group of ANC commissioners, including Commissioner Clock and a number of other commissioners from across the city, put together last Saturday.
Oh yeah.
Deputy
Thank you. You sent me that memo, right?
Charles Allen, Robert White, NAACP, the Guardian Angels. They were all there, and that was what was amazing, was that they all, and Deputy Mayor Donahue. And there was a real convergence of thinking that, yes, we need to look at what is it that we ask police to do, and what are the things that, that we've all asked them to do just by default, and maybe it never belonged to in their field, in their scope, and they're not the right fit. But we need to look at that and say, what do we take off their plate? And then we can look at the budget and say, okay, where should those resources, then what does a police force look like?
Yeah.
We reimagine that so that we can be a national leader in justice and community safety.
And Chandler, having those conversations right now is really important because you're teeing it up for budget season, right?
Yeah.
You're teeing it up.
Yeah, and that's what we did, and it was thanks to all these commissioners that put their volunteer time in with me to help put that on. But one thing, going back to this area, I used to work for the Latin American Youth Center years ago, and I remember this whole thing about crews, and I learned so much between the young folks that would come into our program, and they would explain to me, look, this is not just now. This is, you have to join a crew, otherwise you feel unsafe and you don't feel like you belong.
Right.
And then there's disputes that happen. And I know LAYC had a whole program where they had street outreach workers that they'd recruited from when they were young. They'd nurtured them from when they were young to be able to go back in there. And they were friends in these crews and said, come on, do you need to really pick up a gun? And in this case, a semi-automatic, that's just a whole nother level.
It's crazy. It's mind blowing. Thank you.
And I really think that
for that work,
organizations like those are really, really geared and set up to be able to do that. And also Mary Center, who kind of does provide those services, and they have those connections to know who's actually having these issues on a medical level. I know they can't share the medical part of it, but they can certainly share that, hey, there's some trauma going on in this crew or with this group that, behavioral health may want to look into.
That's great. And by the way, Allie's going to post this, but so I did a telephone town hall last month, and this month I did a community Zoom, both on public safety, but different segments. So the telephone town hall was the traditional hear from the police. This month we did a Zoom panel where we heard from community-based entities that are doing community safety work. Monday, we have a youth town hall, and LAYC is our co-host. And this is about elevating youth voices, so you're welcome to attend and not speak. You're welcome to, if you want to hear what youth are saying, or if you have youth in your life that you think would be heard by their council member. So we're excited.
Lupe's a dear friend of mine, and if you guys don't know, years ago when I worked there, she was a young lady who got shot. She got shot in the leg in a shooting right out front of LAYC. And, she recovered from that and is now the executive director. And she's been through, she knows so much. She's amazing.
She's great. She's great. And she was on the
I'd love to participate.
Yeah.
I actually have a question for someone who, I don't know, if Cynthia or a council member can answer this. The PSA meetings that MPD would have in person, have those gone virtual? And can we give that information to those on this Zoom meeting who want to speak more directly to MPD?
They're virtual now, yeah.
Yes, they have. And I know that the 3D CAC meeting was tonight, so sometimes it is a problem that the meetings overlap. But I'll be happy to share the information with you and Commissioner Bonneau, just so you all can filter it to the people who are on this call. I'm sure you all have their email address. I know some people have logged off. I just want to make sure everybody has it moving forward. But the PSA meetings continue, especially for the Parkview side. I know that they had one, I think it was last week, where they discussed what was going on in PSA 408. So I'll be sure to just share those with you all as they come up.
Thank you.
All right. Any final words from neighbors, residents, anyone we haven't heard from yet before we close out?
Can I just add one thing? I'm sorry I talk so much. While we're sitting here, I got an email from someone who's outraged that the council unanimously voted to take away $15 million to fund the police. And I just want you to understand that as enlightened as this group was tonight, there's a lot of discussion still going on in community about more police and funding, et cetera, et cetera. So for those of you who feel that we really need to be shifting those funds, I need you to remember that your elected leaders have to hear that over and over again, because we hear both. And this defund police, this reallocate funds, this is newer Some people have been saying it a long time, but the fact that it's become a chorus is very new and it needs to be sustained. So I'm just putting that out there as a case in point of how this public dialogue matters. And I want to thank you all for letting me talk so much. I felt like I talked a lot, but I was also really listening and hearing from you, and I appreciate the opportunity. And put my email in the chat so you have it for whatever you need.
Thanks, Councilmember. That gave neighbors enough time to think about what their final thought or comment that they might want to make would be.
Yeah, I'll just echo the organize, organize, organize. Government alone is not going to resolve what's happening. We need to build partnerships and relationships between governments, businesses, nonprofit, health groups. We have more than enough resources in our community to address this. It's the misallocation of these resources that is leading to the problem. So please join us. We heard a lot from the government perspective. We've obviously seen government's failure to fully address these issues. And we've seen an increase in violence over the last year. The year-to-date homicide rates are up in the district. This is 4 years in a row, and I'm more than happy to start with the mayor. I think that's she is the executive. She sits on top of the government, and that's where we need to put our focus. But if you'd like to organize, I'm gonna put my phone number again down here. Please call me this weekend. We do a lot with the Public Safety Coalition as well as MAM DC, which will allow you to help our neighbors directly. And just keep in mind, a lot of the work we do is preventative work, and there's no way to measure it. We never get points for it. The shootings that we prevented, we'll never see that shooting. So we got to do everything we can. We have to have a lot of faith that our work and coming together tonight is leading to a safer community, as hard as that is to see in moments like this. So thank you again. All of you who are struggling with what you saw, my heart's with you. If you just want to talk this weekend, please just reach out and engage me, and I'll be there right there with you.
Thanks, Bob. Commissioner Castañon, anything before we sign off?
No, thank you all so much for staying with us past time.
All right, we'll leave our contact in the chat. You also have it on the email and the calendar invite, and we'll be in touch with notes, the August invite, and thank you all. Be safe.
Thank you.